When I say Kia Sorento, many of you probably have difficulty picturing what the old one looked like. Probably because it looked sort of like raw cauliflower and had all the functional appeal of a vacuum cleaner or a Chevy Traverse.
What a piece of junk.
There's no doubt that Kia has been on a bit of a roll lately, and when it came to redesigning the Sorento, they easily could have just mimicked the styling of their award-winning Telluride. And, you know, just made it look exactly the same, but just scaled everything down a bit. Kind of like if they were a German auto company. But since they're not a German auto company, they didn't do that. Instead, they gave it fresh new exterior styling, its own unique upscale interior, and then they sent it off to compete with what does this thing compete with again? What's going on, everyone? Jax here, and today I have the 2021 Kia Sorento. To be honest, it's really impressive to me that Kia went out of their way to make the Sorento sort of unique and original in their SUV lineup. In this top SX trim with the off-road X-Line package, it looks fantastic. I actually really like it in this sort of green color that Kia calls Aruba green, which is interesting because the only thing most people know about Aruba is that it precedes Jamaica in a Beach Boys song. The detailing in the headlights and the grille, the sort of crisp body lines, the kind of original and fun vertical taillights, they all combine to make a sort of handsome and substantial looking SUV that is different enough from the Telluride while still possessing a sort of family resemblance. It somehow wows you with its 20-inch wheels and sort of flashy exterior without becoming a parody of itself. Dare I say it, it's almost kind of restrained. I really think that Kia's design briefs probably just say, make it look awesome, and then we'll figure out how the rest will work later. Don't worry about it. Just make it look really, really good.
Did you ever think that maybe there's more to life than being really, really, really ridiculously good looking?
Under the hood of this SX trim, you get a 2.5-liter turbocharged four-cylinder making 281 horsepower and 311 pound-feet of torque, all running through an 8-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission. Oh, and of course, all-wheel drive. Why an 8-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission? Well, something performance.
I just like the sound of it.
While that sounds like a healthy amount of horsepower and torque, nearly all the vehicles in this segment, as well as the segment above it, pack naturally aspirated V6 engines. So while the Sorento never ever feels slow, it's not exactly going to wow you with its acceleration, nor does it need to. But of course, power delivery doesn't matter if you're an unrestrained floppy mess of a vehicle. I'm looking at you, Ford Ranger. And the Sorento mostly isn't. So here we are behind the wheel of the 2021 Kia Sorento, which drives very well in general. I mean, the bar is not exactly set very high in this class of vehicle, which I'm not even really sure what counts as a midsize SUV anymore. I feel like pretty much everything these days is either full-size 3-row crossover, ginormous, you know, suburban size, or then it's what used to be compact, like CR-V or Toyota RAV4. So the Sorento is a sort of interesting in-between in sort of that midsize where you don't have many other SUVs. So the Sorento represents sort of an interesting entry into a relatively small class of vehicles. But even though the bar isn't set super high, The Sorento drives quite well. The steering is pretty accurate. There's not a lot of feel. I mean, it's pretty lifeless if we're being honest. It has a little bit of that kind of bandy feel, like I guess it's connected to something because things are happening. But like, how much road feel do you really expect in a vehicle of this nature? So I think the steering is fine. It moves off center, which I like. I don't like when there's like a dead spot. It doesn't have too much of a dead spot. In regular mode, there is a little bit of one. You can see I'm kind of moving it, not getting too much of a response, but if you put it into sport mode, you get a little bit more of an accurate response. I'm fine with that. It's not a big deal in this kind of vehicle. The throttle and the brake have a good calibration, well suited to the car. The brake pedal is firm enough and it brings the car to a stop smartly. It doesn't have a lot of, unnecessary travel. It doesn't have a ton of feel, but then again, what does in this sort of vehicle? Like, I think they are perfectly fine for what people will use this for. Another thing that's sort of impressive in this vehicle is the power. You have a turbocharged 4-cylinder as opposed to a V6, which most of its competitors have. But because it has 311 pound-feet of torque and the transmission is tuned to sort of like exploit every bit of it, it never feels slow. In fact, I kind of forgot how powerful this thing was until a couple passing situations on, multi-lane roads where I kind of put my foot into it and was rewarded with a pretty good shove. So the Sorento has no trouble in the power department. It's not gonna wow you, but it's definitely not slow. Now we're on the handling road right now. We're going over this first kind of bumpy area, and the Sorento suspension is soft. It's definitely on the softer side. I would say it is as soft as I would want it to be without starting to feel wallowy. It definitely has some secondary and tertiary, if you want to get technical about it, motions to it. I know it's intended to keep the ride smooth and compliant, which on the highway and straight ahead roads, it absolutely is. Incredibly comfortable on the highway. I drove literally all day Saturday driving Hallie around Atlanta for volleyball, cheerleading, all sorts of things. And this was awesome on the highway. Very comfortable, very compliant. On these not as good roads though, you do get a little bit of that kind of floatiness. The big bump though, not a problem. It just results in a little extra motion there. So I'm not really gonna ding the Sorento for that. This is a family vehicle, but it's not as sort of firmly sprung as a Honda Passport, which drives and rides just a little bit more controlled, a little bit better than this. Now getting up to speed here, I mentioned power. The Sorento will do 0 to 60 in 6.3 seconds, which is totally fine for the class. The transmission, interestingly, is a dual clutch, 8-speed automatic, transmission, and it's fine. I don't really know what the benefit is because you're not like Porsche PDKing it, swapping gears, and incredibly intense performance driving. It works perfectly well. I do think the dual clutch exhibits a little bit of awkwardness at lower speeds, where automatic transmissions will kind of creep forward. The Sorento will sort of initially creep kind of fast when you take your foot off the brake. It almost can catch you by surprise. It'll sort of move forward rather quickly and create a little bit of a weird situation where it'll move forward and you want to brake and then you'll give it too much brake and come to a stop a little too quickly, a little bit jerky. I think you would get used to it. I don't think that that's something, if you own the car, is going to be a problem. I don't like when reviewers point out stuff like this and they don't act like over the course of like a month you'd figure it out. You definitely would figure it out. It's not something that's going to continually plague you or something, if I'm being honest. It's just something that you have to be aware of. I think lots of cars have these little kind of quirks in their operation. I don't know why they went with a dual clutch. It is perfectly fine in normal driving like right now. It's smooth, it doesn't draw attention to itself. It's just in a few of those low speed situations or when the auto start stop kind of comes on, there's like just this little kind of almost microscopic delay and then it's like, okay, I'm ready to go, So, if you test drive the car, be aware of it, but you'll get used to it. It won't bother you in the slightest. I think another thing that kind of comes with the territory with this car is that you'll notice, and the ride is incredibly comfortable and plush, maybe slightly too much so, you'll notice a little bit of road texture, and I think a lot of that is coming from the 20-inch wheels and relatively thin tires. So it's an acceptable price to pay for the look. I think this car looks fantastic. This is a great looking car inside and out. I think the Sorento is aces. And so I'm okay with feeling a little bit more of that road texture. The Kia K5, when I was praising its ride a couple reviews ago, it was riding on 18s and sidewalls that were a little thicker. This one's on 20s with thinner sidewalls, so I think you're getting a little bit more of that rougher texture. But that's understandable, and if you don't like it, don't get the higher trim with the bigger wheels and tires. Another area that you can praise the Sorento is with these seats. I imagine that they are very similar to the seats in the K5. They are very comfortable. They are just bolstered enough that I feel, you know, secure. The leather looks great. You got the kind of like diamond-ish quilting on the outside of bolsters. They're just really nice, really comfortable, heated and cooled. I got the cooling on right now because it's like 90 degrees outside and raining and sunny and cloudy all at the same time because Georgia at the end of summer. But the seats are great. The lumbar feels good. My messed up back is supported, so no complaints there. Also, this driving position is excellent. I'm 6'6", and I think that the driving position in the Sorento, I've got myself in a very comfortable position. There's tons of space behind me. Hallie and Ella have both ridden in the car. I think the front, you do sit a little bit more kind of SUV upright, but the trade-off is that the second row captain's chairs are very roomy for a vehicle of this size. I mean, this is a mid-size SUV. It is not a large SUV. And I think the second row has a ton of space in it, considering the exterior footprint of the vehicle. Now, in contrast, the third row, if I'm being honest, I think the third row in this car is stupid. At least make it an option, Kia. It should be an option. When you have something like the Honda Passport that's rocking 50 cubic feet of cargo space because they took the third row out, because if you want a third row, get the Pilot, I think this car could actually have more cargo space and be even more useful. So I wish the third row was like something you could delete out of the car because, I mean, shoot, honestly, I'd take the captain's chairs with no third row. I think that would be kind of a dope combination, and it would really up the usefulness of the car. And my girls are not getting in that third row. There's no way. Hallie's 5'5", and even she was like, yeah, big nope on that, not going back there. Now, one thing I will point out, I like this driving position. I have had it set like this all week, and I love it. It's great. But there's a weird kind of lack of knee room when you get in and out of the car. It's almost like the vent and design and then the steering column are like lower than you would think as you are getting out of the car, and you kind of bump your knee on it if you're a taller person. And so I'm not really sure why, because it doesn't bother me when I'm actually driving the car. But when you are getting out of the car, if you're a taller person, you might bump your knee on it. And that just seems sort of odd. So I just want to point that out. Any taller people watching this, I don't know. It's just a strange thing. I mean, my knees are not touching the dash or anything like this. But when you get out of the car, the steering column's like, no, I'm down here. And you're like, whack, you know, so it's just weird. I don't know, you get used to it, I'm sure. Here's the thing about the Sorento after a week. I'm actually filming this on the last day that I have the car, so I've driven it a ton. Yesterday, I drove it for hours and hours, taking Hallie everywhere, like I said. It does its job so well. It is perfectly comfortable to drive. The only complaints I have about the sort of suspension floatiness are coming from an enthusiast perspective. I don't think Mrs. Jax would have noticed it at all. She didn't have an opportunity to drive this one. And so that's a marginal complaint that only applies to a small percentage of you guys watching this. For most people, this thing goes about its business in just this really fantastically competent way that I think a lot of Kia's products are demonstrating now, if that makes sense. Like, that is something that I've noticed about Kia in the past couple years. They're not just packing an incredible value, these plush interior accommodations, the incredible exterior styling. Of course, you have to mention the exterior styling of like nearly every Kia model now just looks fantastic. It's just this overall sense of competence. And it's kind of the same thing that I think really won people over about Honda, is that it just goes about its business in a way that rewards you for owning the vehicle. Now, I will say, I tend to still prefer Honda because of the driving dynamics, but as a total package, this is superior to the Honda Passport. In fact, it's superior to just about anything in this class for this price. I just enjoy a vehicle that is sort of a pleasure to own because it executes on its mission statement so completely. And if you have a more mature family like ours, meaning that your kids are getting a little bit older and maybe you don't need that ginormous SUV space where you're bringing, you know, all the kid stuff like the pack and plays and the beds and the bouncy chairs for babies and like all the different things. Your kids are getting a little bit older. We now have a high schooler and a middle schooler. So we have to carry some things, but mostly we're just carrying ourselves. And in that regard, this car is excellent. I mean, it really is. It really ticks all the boxes. And it spoils you just enough to make you feel special. And there's nobody doing that better than Kia right now. If I have one main complaint to share with you, it's here. And it's not because the Sorento's cargo space is inadequate in some way. Actually, compared to the competition, the Sorento has a decent amount of space back here. There are 38.4 cubic feet of space behind the second row, compared with the Chevy Blazer's 30-point-something cubic feet of space, the Volkswagen Tiguan's 33 cubic feet of space, and the hopelessly ugly Ford Edge's 39 cubic feet of space. The cavernous Honda Passport can swallow up to 50 cubic feet of space behind its second row. But it's not particularly attractive either, and its infotainment and interior materials currently still lag way behind the Kia Sorento. Well, so then what am I complaining about? Well, it's the third row. The Kia Sorento comes standard with a, in my opinion, marginally useful third row that, for a family like mine, doesn't do anything except use up potential cargo space. Personally, if I thought that I was going to actually need a third row from time to time, I would probably scale back a couple options in this top trim and just buy a larger 3-row Telluride. I think that would be a better value from a family perspective if you forego a few creature comforts for the usable third row space. But giving up options is easier said than done, because this Sorento has some excellent options in this, frankly, gorgeous interior. The textures and the materials are top-notch, especially in the areas that your hands most often touch, such as the door cards, the steering wheel, and the center armrest. There is literally no hard-touch plastic above the grab handle on the door. Everything is either leather, fake leather, or fake wood, and it looks really good. It's a thoughtfully designed interior with superb attention to detail. And that is something that Kia is just killing the game at right now. The 12.3-inch fully digital gauge cluster looks awesome. It's sort of vibrant and kind of gimmicky enough to kind of satisfy people's upscale intentions. The 10.3-inch widescreen infotainment touchscreen running Hyundai and Kia's excellent UVO system is just as good here as it is in all of their products. One gripe, though, is that the larger screen only comes with wired Apple CarPlay, which sort of seems counterintuitive in this top trim model. But because this is a top trim model, you get a very high resolution surround view camera system, Kia's sort of turn signal camera system, a panoramic sunroof, heated and cooled seats, and a heated steering wheel, as well as all of Kia's safety systems, and an adaptive cruise control system that works very well. In fact, I used it extensively on Saturday driving Hallie all over Atlanta, as I said in the driving portion. And one thing I forgot to mention was that I thought it worked better than it did in the K5. The K5 was fine as far as adaptive cruise control systems go, but for some reason I felt like the Sorento system was just better. It just kept it in the lane more intuitively. It was smoother. I just thought overall it was a very satisfying highway companion. And even though I complain that the third row in this gorgeous cabin is relatively useless, there is a ton of room in the second row captain's chairs for my tall family, and there's even enough room for me to sit behind me, which is always impressive in any car or SUV. or truck, or other vehicle that hasn't been invented yet. That's also, for some reason, I think becoming one of my most popular tests, I guess, in the same way that people love to see Doug DeMuro get into the backseat of vehicles, seeing if I can sit behind myself as the driver, I think is a true measure of the interior packaging of a vehicle. Can a 6'6" dude sit behind a 6'6" dude? If the answer is yes, then that vehicle has some interior space. Are there any complaints about this awesome interior? Well, just a few minor ones. The rear doors are actually like huge to aid access, I guess, to the third row. That's sort of pointless. So that could provide like a slight problem in like crowded or narrow parking spaces. Also, weirdly, the doors don't open with a satisfying click. They just sort of open. When you pull the handle, they just open, which I know will disappoint Redline reviews, but it's just kind of odd from a tactile sensation. There's also a lot of piano black in here, which I know will upset Savage Geese. But as much as it annoys me when people make too big of a deal about piano black, no offense, Savage Geese, I do think that it's a little bit obscene in here. It's kind of like they went overboard, and I like literally barely touched it the other day, and it was blech with fingerprints. So, you know, keeping it clean could be an issue. And I know they have to keep separation from the Telluride, I get that, but I do think a top trim with an interior that's this impressive should maybe have memory function for the seats and maybe a heads-up display as well. Those are minor quibbles, but this is a top trim and everything else in here is just amazing. So, should you buy what about the Hyundai Santa Fe? Oh, that. Well, there's a reason I haven't mentioned the Sorento's corporate twin, the Hyundai Santa Fe, during this entire review. And that's because it's ugly as shit. Seriously, guys, what are you doing over there at Hyundai? Like, does someone have an anime channel on loop in the design studio 24/7? Is your design brief for all of Hyundai's vehicles now say, make it look like Naruto, but if you were all on mushrooms? You guys made the Ioniq 5, which looks incredible. You can do this. I believe in you. But no, in short, the Santa Fe is a big nope for me. I don't care what the interior looks like. Anyway. So, should you buy a 2021 Kia Sorento? Well, yes, it might not be the class-dominating beast that the Kia Telluride is, but it's still better than everything else in the class. It's just got a little bit of everything that most buyers want in a midsize SUV, including a semi-useless third row. And at just 44 grand, basically fully loaded as you see it here, it still somehow manages to be a pretty good value. I think that's a very reasonable asking price for a vehicle with all of these features and amenities that looks this good. When you factor in those good looks, along with this Sorento's cargo space, available options, and just general versatility, you have a winning formula. A winning formula that Kia pioneered on the Telluride. Guys, Kia keeps winning because they deserve to keep winning. Other automakers, take note. This is how it's done. You offer the customers, the consumers, a lot of value along with interior features and options that are generally reserved for sort of luxury vehicles. If Kia's driving dynamics get just a little bit better and they keep that industry-leading warranty, then I don't know what's stopping them from just taking over the entire mainstream market. All of that success is perfectly encapsulated in this Kia Sorento. And if you're looking for a very solid and semi-luxurious mid-size SUV, I would encourage you to go give the Sorento a look. Guys, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I was really impressed by this Kia Sorento. I like the mid-size SUV market. I like it a lot, actually. I think it's perfect for families like ours that need a little bit of space for people, especially tallish people, but we don't necessarily have to carry all of the things that we did when the girls were younger. Getting a midsize SUV seems like a perfect compromise between sort of size, space, luxury options, the whole gamut of sort of usability. This Sorento sort of checks off all those boxes, and the fact that it makes you feel so good in sort of the ownership experience, like you're really getting something for your money, which is becoming increasingly rare these days, I think that just seals the deal. I really like the Honda Passport a lot, but I think this Sorento tops the segment right now just because of everything it's offering, combined with its undeniably good style inside and out. I'm curious to know your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to know your thoughts about Kia in general. Let's leave that as our sort of comment section question. What are your thoughts on Kia in general? If you weren't willing to check them out before, is the continued success of their vehicles and the attractiveness of their vehicles and the luxuriousness of their interiors, is it winning you over? Would you consider Kia for your next car purchase? I want to know. I'm really curious about that from a mainstream standpoint. Until next time, ride safe, drive safe. If you're new here, please consider liking and subscribing, and I will catch you in the next review. Thanks, everyone. Peace. Of course, it's raining for no reason. Oh, past a police officer. I was just coasting down the hill. I wasn't even going that fast. I wasn't intentionally speeding. When he passed me, he put on his brake lights like, I might come and get you, buddy. And I was like, really, bro? Really? Sunday afternoon, I'm doing a review. I'm in a Kia Sorento. It's not like I'm testing the LC500 or something. I would have totally got pulled over if I was driving something like that.